Today, we are going to be discussing one of the biggest altcoin trends that's starting to present itself in the market and look at a potential rotation that could be just beginning, which could present massive opportunities for investors. We're also going to discuss the lay of the land heading into what is a pretty big macro week and talk about where Bitcoin sits. Can it potentially push higher? What does this mean for altcoins? Is this the beginning of an altcoin season, or is this simply exit liquidity before the next leg down? And we will also look at some of the biggest dates for next week. It is, as I said, a pretty big week, not only for macro, but also for crypto, with many big protocol upgrades taking place this week, which I believe is actually one of the catalysts behind why DeFi has been running. We're going to also speak about that today. So lots and lots of stuff to discuss. Make sure you smash the like button if you are excited. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into the show. Before we get into all the altcoin fun stuff, let's just zoom out a little bit and talk about Bitcoin, talk about the macro lay of the land here. On a Sunday night in the US, we can see Bitcoin did pump into resistance at the 31.5 to 32K level. On your weekly chart, this is your major resistance level, but we have seen a slight pullback. But what's interesting about this pullback is it's not really a substantial pullback. Typically, when we see rejections into big areas where shorts pile up, we usually see like pretty big wicks to the downside. What we have actually observed over the weekend is Bitcoin, instead of pulling back, it has simply just consolidated in this sideways range. So what actually happens when you get consolidations in sideways ranges as opposed to major pullbacks is typically that is your pullback. So what I'm monitoring right now is over the next few hours, and once we get the weekly close towards the end of the American night today, how does Bitcoin hold up? If it can print that weekly candle above the 30K level, then that would be confirmation to me that this was a consolidation, which is in line with a typical pullback. And that could be an indicator for me to start looking towards the next potential move to the upside. If that does happen, so we're going to have to wait until 12 a.m., then that could be definitely a sign that Bitcoin can squeeze up to 31.5 to 32K. I do think this is huge, a huge area of resistance, but just like we saw back in March 2023, when you have price knocking at the door of a resistance level for quite some time, that typically gives it the strength to break even higher. And this is what we're seeing now. We're seeing price knocking at this door of the 31K level. If we can continue to consolidate here and test, then eventually the shorts typically run out of stamina. And what you can see is pretty aggressive short squeezes to the upside before probably consolidation and a pullback back into that range where you need to flip into support. That's typically what happens. Resistance levels, once they are broken, you tend to come back and retest them at some point, and that is when you'll probably get your greater pullback. But let's just see over the next few hours how Bitcoin responds here. It's a very key level for Bitcoin, but the strength of Bitcoin, especially versus the rest of the market, is undeniable here. It's so undeniable that 70 days of price action to the downside was engulfed in a single week. So that's just a reminder of how quickly things change in crypto. I mean, we spent almost 2.5 months complaining about Bitcoin. It was boring. The market is not giving us opportunities. It's sideways, it's downwards. All of a sudden, at 24K, you have that huge pivot, and 70 days worth of downwards price action is engulfed in a single week. 70 days engulfed in 7 days. That is just, so telling of the crypto market and how quickly the narratives change and evolve. So you always have to have your finger on the pulse. It's another lesson that when the market gets boring and when you don't want to be in the market, and when you're really scared, we saw the stablecoin FUD. We also had, lots of FUD with the SEC and the altcoins selling off. A lot of people started to check out during that period. That was actually time to check in and be super, super interested at what opportunities that may present for the next leg of price movement. Now, I don't think anyone expected the pump to be this violent because no one, apart from insiders and BlackRock, knew that the ETF was coming. But we always know in crypto, something always comes. Something always surprises us. And that's why you really got to stay engaged in this market if you are serious about making money in this market. So just the TLDR on Bitcoin. Yes, we're heading into resistance, but the more we test this resistance, the higher chance it has of breaking. I do think a short squeeze could be on the cards, but obviously I won't get too excited about that until we get our weekly candle close. Ideally, you would close above 30.8, but I just don't think we're going to get there. As long as you hold the 30K level, and you can actually see this on the daily, that would be your level to hold for now to kind of prep for that next test. And yeah, we'll see if that test can actually break the price. I don't think it's the best risk reward long right now. heading into resistance. If you're going to ask me objectively, what I'm personally doing, I'm not longing Bitcoin per se. I'm going to see how the weekly candle closes. If we do hold up, I might take a long, but it's not going to be a significant long. I'm more interested personally in looking at where capital could rotate on the altcoin side, because there are a lot of altcoins which haven't really moved as much as Bitcoin, but we are now starting to see the signs of liquidity entering some select narratives. So Bitcoin for me is just synonymous of the entire crypto market. We use Bitcoin as our momentum gauge. We use it as our strength gauge. But when it comes to making money, I do prefer a lot of the time to look at the altcoin trades as your proxy to make money. So in today's video, we're going to go through a few coins which are starting to look like they could be home to a pretty large rotation. And of course, I'll give you the trade setups and the kind of breakout levels that I'm looking for those coins specifically. But yeah, Bitcoin for me just needs to hold strong for the altcoins to perform well. And yeah, that's basically my opinion on Bitcoin. Dominance, though, is still rocketing. So for everyone saying it's an old season, that's an old season, this is not an old season. Not yet, at least. So Bitcoin dominance is still having an absolute run. It broke above the 48% level. It's had a pretty big move to the upside. I think what we're seeing now is a slight pullback. So dominance is cooling down after what has been a really, really aggressive rally. So your pullback in dominance could give a little bit of leeway for some of the altcoins to run. But even if some of the altcoins run, because we are seeing select narratives run, like, your Dino coins like Litecoin and BCH, your DeFi coins, we're not seeing a full-blown alt season. So this isn't a full-blown alt season until you see a confirmed reversal of Bitcoin dominance. I want to make that very clear. You can't say it's an alt season until you actually get reversal of Bitcoin dominance. Technically, this is actually, by definition, Bitcoin season. But the good thing about Bitcoin season is that you start to get some more liquidity coming into the market. Now, I don't think the inflows have been great. I think largely it's been more of a capital rotation just within crypto, largely from like stable coins, from some of the bigger alts we've seen, into Bitcoin. We've seen a bit of fresh capital come in. We can see this on the total 3 chart. So we have had a pivot off the lows, but we haven't had a significant amount of capital come into the market. That's just something I want to make clear. And we can also see the total crypto market cap, although it has increased, it hasn't been a significant increase. I mean, you have had an increase from 1.009 to 1.148, but that hasn't lined up percentage-wise with the rally we've seen from Bitcoin, which indicates to me that some of this is simply a rotation and not like a pure liquidity injection into Bitcoin. You can also tell via the spot to leverage ratio. So most of the buyers over this recent Bitcoin rally have actually been positioned in spot, not leverage. So this is less of a speculated rally and more so people positioning themselves around what they view as bullish traditional finance news surrounding BlackRock and other market participants in the institutional world deciding to enter crypto. So that's been largely the driver of this rally. So what can we tell from total 3 in terms of, alt season and what the altcoins are doing? Well, what we can affirm is that we did have a pivot off the lows. We have made a higher low. That is often a bullish sign for the market. That is a great thing. But I do just want to kind of point your attention towards the 352 level, $352 billion level on the total 3 chart, which is basically the crypto index excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, because we know that this is a pretty major, was a major support level, which was the level that the total 3 actually bounced off before making its first higher low, but also it was a support level again for the months of February, March, and April before we had the SR flip and it became a resistance level. So this is your key level that you actually need to clear for total 3 to even start thinking about some big alt season, because that's going to be your indicator that people actually are interested in rotating capital. And what you would likely see is if total 3 pushes up here and breaks this level, you would probably see that in confluence with Bitcoin dominance having a slight pullback. So you would likely see this candle on the weekly start to reverse into the red for the next week, and then you would see maybe a pullback into the 50 to 50.5% level, and that would be your catalyst for total 3 actually flipping this into support. And then obviously you've got your diagonal level, which is highlighted in orange here, which is your next major structural level to clear. But until you clear this level, then technically we are just making lower highs. So you see the lower high here, lower high here, lower high here. Could this just be another lower high and another chance to rotate out of alts back into Bitcoin? Well, that is something we're going to have to see in a couple of weeks when we do start to get some reaction around this diagonal level. But that is a scenario. Obviously, in the meantime, there's going to be long opportunities. But from a macro perspective, no greater alt season is going to happen until you clear major structure on the total 3, because that is your indicator of capital being actually interested in flowing into these coins. What coins have been performing best this week? Well, clearly it's been the DeFi narrative, which has taken the crypto world by storm over the weekend. This is something I'm going to discuss in just a few minutes. I'm going to dig deep on DeFi and actually talk about how this could be signaling a greater rotation and what my plan is with the DeFi index, because you've seen, AAVE, Synthetics, Uni, Compound all up 20-30% on Sunday. Massive gains, and it's definitely says something pretty large about the market in terms of the market's appetite for buying some of these OG coins. And that actually could be a healthy thing for the market and could be a reason why investors could feel confident rotating into some smaller cap plays. But I do have a pretty key level on my charts, which I think needs to hold first before we can get too excited, and then we can start looking at some altcoins. But I'm going to get into the DeFi stuff in just a few minutes, because first we have to talk about what is happening this week from a macro perspective. It's very important to start with the big macro dates, the big macro news, and then obviously we can get into all the fun stuff. But the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the fact that Bitcoin monthly returns in July are typically fairly positive. So June, which is historically a pretty red month, actually ended up closing 12.17% in the green. But you have July, which is the month we're about to enter in 5 days here, which is typically actually a very green month. The last 3 months of July have been double-digit returners for Bitcoin. This is also lining up with a potential short squeeze. So I don't know how much you want to read into this, because look, data sets of 10 aren't necessarily the best data sets to use. I mean, you only have data from 2013, and in the stock market, you've got decades and decades and decades of data, but it is the best we've got. And if we do look at the data, despite it being a small data set, you haven't actually had any double-digit drawdowns for Bitcoin ever in the month of July, and you have had 5 months that are double digits or higher, so 10% plus in terms of its gains. So this is a good sign for July. But in saying that, we are also heading into some pretty big macro news this week, which could end up being good, but you just have to pay attention that it's going to be a pretty big week in terms of the Fed's stance towards a potential Fed pivot here. So you've got the home price indices on Tuesday, new home sales, durable goods orders, smaller macro dates, but just a bit of data. I wouldn't pay too much attention to it. The big date, obviously, is Powell speaking. This is going to give us an inclination as to whether he does want to conduct a couple rate hikes this year, or whether they might be conducting more of a sustained pause, looking towards rate cuts. Just called me the GOAT. I'm not the GOAT, bro, but thank you very much for the kind words there. Thursday, we got home sales, jobless claims, Q1 GDP. Powell speaking again. So Powell actually speaking twice in 1 week. That's, usually going to cause some slight bumps for the market. Then on Friday, I think is probably the biggest day with your PCE report, as well as China's PMIs. We know that the last crypto run was actually fueled by easing China liquidity conditions. What data do we get out of China? That's going to be another interesting thing to pay attention to. 𝗵𝗵𝗃 also did a tweet outlining the key dates for the week. If you want to screenshot this video, so you're prepared for the week. You've got your home sales data, then the Fed speaking, then your Q1 GDP data, PCE as well. 4 speaker events this week, and 𝗵𝗵𝗃 says it's a huge week with a Fed pivot in question. I'm not going to read this entire tweet right now, but Fabian, I think, did a great tweet that you should read in your own time, which basically kind of talks about the 2 angles to consider for the market this week. One is crypto technicals, which look great. So this is the first thing, we've just gone over the technicals. We've just gone over how the month of July is typically good. We've gone over how Bitcoin consolidating in this range is actually pretty much equivalent to a pullback, which is quite a bullish sign when you start to get higher time frame bull flags like that. Broader altcoin participation kicking in, steady price inclines across alts. I mean, the market looks good. Stable price action overall, which is, obviously a positive sign. That's the first thing. But there's also the second angle, which is correlation to TradFi and macro. So you have the Nasdaq starting to pull back. You have gold starting to pull back. You had Japan sliding. You're probably going to have maybe a bit of a sell-off heading into Monday, Tuesday. We don't actually know, but what we did see was, a pretty red close on Friday that could transfer into Monday. How closely does crypto follow the macro next week? That is another question, because it's kind of funny. We've got this contrast here of really strong crypto fundamentals, price action, on-chain, etc. And then you have kind of weakening macro, in my opinion. Of course, the dates this week are going to go a long way as to dictating what the Fed actually does here. But in general, you are probably going to see constricting liquidity across Q3. This is my thesis, at least, that heading into mid to end of Q3 into Q4, we see worsening liquidity conditions. And if liquidity takes a tumble, I mean, no matter how strong the crypto fundamentals are, typically we see pullbacks in that environment, because when you see stock market equity pullbacks, crypto tends to follow. Just depends how resistant we are up until then. So I'm not trading on that thesis this week, but I do think towards the end of the quarter, and I would read Fabian's post here as well about this, we do start to see a slight worsening of liquidity conditions. That's just my thesis, and that's why kind of any trades I'm making today, I'm cognizant of the fact I'll probably get lower prices Q3 to Q4. I may be wrong there, but that's kind of my theory. And look, that could mean Bitcoin and alts run in the meantime and for the next few weeks, and then we do see a greater pullback. That's definitely something that can happen. And for that reason, I'm looking at the rotational plays now, but I'm also, wary of my long-term buys. Probably going to be a lot stronger heading into like September, October than they are now. That's just my thesis anyway. Would love to see a pump and then a major pullback. And that would kind of confirm the bull trend for me. And on the pullback would be a much better time, in my opinion, to stack long-term rather than kind of buying into resistance here. But more interested in talking about the trading side of things today. Narrative trades for, the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next 3 weeks. That's more where today's video is angled, and the long-term stuff still not accumulating too aggressively. That's just my plan. Obviously, you should have your own plan. Right, let's get into some of the altcoin stuff now. I've talked enough about macro, talked enough about Bitcoin. Before we get into it, if you do want to trade Bitcoin, any of the major alts or commodities or Forex as well, PrimeXBT does have a nice bonus. So you've got a 7% deposit bonus if you, for example, like to trade on Bybit, but the new KYC is forcing you to look for a new home, then PrimeXBT could be a good option for you. So you've got the deposit bonus, or if you're like a big trader, then the 25% discount on commissions could be the bonus that you end up selecting. So it depends if you're, simply depositing and trading spot, then you'd probably want to go for the deposit bonus. If you're trading regularly and then you want to save money on fees, then the commissions would make sense. So pick either one, up to $7,000 deposit bonus using the link in the description. And it's a pretty nice platform to use. You can see here they've got lots of pairs. I think for the big alts, this is a pretty good place to trade. Doesn't have all of the small caps, so for that I'll use something like an OKX. But if I want to trade like any of the major pairs, this is a pretty good place to do so. So link in the description to PrimeXBT, and thank you to them for being one of our official show partners. They've been a fantastic exchange to trade on and work with over the past couple of months. Now let's get into the fun stuff. What has been happening in terms of the altcoins in this market? Now, it's been crazy. I mean, if you told me 2 months ago that, when Bitcoin was starting to falter, we talked about 70 days of downside. If you told me that two months ago, the biggest pumpers in the market when Bitcoin reverses would be Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, AAVE, Compound, I mean, I would have thought you were nuts. But that's ended up what has been happening, because we have this new narrative, which maybe there were signs that it was developing, and we knew at some point TradFi would enter crypto, but really, let's be honest, it came out of nowhere in the sense that we had 6-7 big announcements last week from TradFi firms entering crypto. It was pretty unprecedented in terms of the magnitude and the timing of these announcements. And I think one of the major announcements that we got that I've talked a lot about, but some people have been sleeping on, is the EDX market launch. So this was your brand new crypto exchange backed by Schwab, Fidelity, and Citadel, which supports the trading of Bitcoin, ETH, Litecoin, and BCH. Now, with Robinhood delisting ADA, Sol, and MATIC, and with the SEC naming a lot of altcoins as securities, there's now a real emphasis on the non-security crypto coins. So the coins that are considered as SEC compliant, SEC resistant, there is a major rotation happening into those coins specifically, because you've got Bitcoin, which is proof of work, Ether, which, because it's listed on EDX, almost by default makes you think it's a commodity, because otherwise, why would Citadel, Schwab, Fidelity not have done their due diligence on what's a commodity and a security? So we can assume that it is a commodity as well. Litecoin, which is basically, if you think of Bitcoin as gold, Litecoin is silver, very similar mechanism, proof of work. Litecoin also under the proof of work categorization, you could consider to be a non-security, and the listing here affirms that, in Bitcoin Cash as well. You can kind of call that a commodity, being more of a currency. It's not proof of stake. You're not staking Bitcoin Cash. More of, I would consider Bitcoin Cash being closer to a stablecoin in terms of how it's actually considered and how it operates. But obviously having that key consensus mechanism, which gives it that non-security definition. And these are the coins that are pumped the hardest. I mean, look at Bitcoin Cash absolutely ripped over the last few days. And funnily enough, I actually did a video, I think a few days ago about Bitcoin Cash. Literally 5 hours before I did a video, it was like $135, and I said keep your eye on Bitcoin Cash. And then literally 5 hours later, it pumped 34%, and it's continued to consolidate in this sub $200 range. So being a huge strong performer. I wouldn't be aping into this now, by the way, but this is the trend here. It is these non-security coins, these proof of work coins that are pumping on this TradFi narrative, and they're also pumping off the back of the Bitcoin narrative. So Bitcoin being strong, it's actually brought some of its closest companions with it. STX, that's a trade that we were successful in last week, has been brought along with Bitcoin as it's, your BRC20 ordinals play that performed really well. Bitcoin Cash being your, payments focused. If you guys don't know the history, in 2014, Bitcoin actually forked. Bitcoin Cash being one of the forks that, Roger Ver and some of the other supporters ended up backing, more of your payments focused network with the change in block size, which was a huge debate back in the community, but is obviously very close to what Bitcoin is. Some would argue this is even closer to Satoshi's original vision than Bitcoin. I won't get into politics. I don't really like Bitcoin Cash, by the way, but that is the kind of thesis behind it. But anyway, Bitcoin Cash, very closely correlated to Bitcoin, and then also Litecoin being considered as kind of your other proof of work Bitcoin alternative, silver kind of play. That's kind of the narrative that at least the Litecoin maxis like to use, that Bitcoin's gold, Litecoin's silver. Look, once again, I don't really agree with that, but that's the thesis here. Litecoin's been performing super well. So there is a clear narrative here. I want to talk about Litecoin for a second in terms of its TA though, because Litecoin's very interesting. Structurally, this looks fantastic. I mean, look on the weekly here. You have your lows setting in at $40. You have your higher lows. You have deviation below this trend line, but in general, it's pretty much stuck to structure quite well. You had your fake out at 68, where we had a slight sell-off, but actually reclaimed on the weekly this trend, making another higher low. And we're about to get a weekly close, which is likely going to see price close here, and maybe a slight pullback, which you're already starting to see back to this pocket. But if Litecoin holds again, then that's your next major retest for what is going to be a pretty significant test of this $95 to $100 level. And this comes after the Litecoin halving. After the hype for the Litecoin halving is starting to build. That's what I meant to say. So Litecoin halving's in 35 days. This is a pretty big, significant event for Litecoin, which has typically resulted in pumps prior to Litecoin halvings. You can see this. I wonder if I have my chart. I don't have my chart here, but basically, every time the Litecoin halving happens, you see Litecoin have a significant pump 30, 40 days prior, and that's typically when it peaks. So could this be your Litecoin halving peak? I'm not sure. But I think it's got new fuel with this EDX narrative, which is seeing the relative strength on Litecoin continue to hold up. So this is just one I would watch. It could be an interesting long in this pocket here at the test of this diagonal. Draw this on your own charts. That could be a decent long, because although we have deviated below, if you're trading on low leverage, you could probably set a stop below, kind of bank on that retest and then a bounce pushing up to this $100 level. I would probably close most positions out at 95 to 100. So that's an interesting trade for those. Maybe you've missed Litecoin, but you want another entry on this trade. This is the pocket I would look at doing it in after we see the weekly close, and then probably a pullback into the next week. That's kind of what I'm thinking from there. But why I'm talking about the OG coins, because I know it's boring, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin. The reason I'm talking about it is because I want to get into DeFi, because we are seeing a trend starting to develop in the market right now, which is OG coins pumping. And it's very weird. As I said, a couple months ago, I wouldn't have expected Litecoin, BCH, Compound, AAVE to have led the market, but they are. And structurally, you can make the argument that this is healthy for the market. So there was a tweet by 𝗙𝗵𝗿, which said, I actually think it's very healthy if we see these old boring coins outperform the new shiny stuff, because it's a sign that the bid is going to quality, not momentum. That's how trends form. Similar to Bitcoin dominance going up being healthy for the markets, like we've seen over the past few weeks, DeFi 1.0 dominance should also be healthy for the alt sector. And I actually agree with him on that take. Now, long term, heading into the next cycle, we know that the new coins tend to perform the old coins. But having the old coins performing really well in the short term is affirmation that structurally the market actually looks quite healthy. And I think that was actually a really good take by 𝗙𝗵𝗿 there. And we're seeing the big DeFi alts starting to lead the way. Are they ahead of its Go stablecoin launch is starting to run. We knew at some point it was going to run, but it kind of came out of nowhere off the back of this, Litecoin BCH run. We saw Compound significantly gain this week. I'm just looking at the DeFi sector here. We saw some of the small caps start to gain significantly as well. I mean, Joe's already started to run. We've seen, I think, Quenta starting to run as well. We've seen Pendle Finance running super hard. That's been a really strong play in the LSD sector, but lots of these DeFi coins starting to run. So what is my opinion on this DeFi wave? Is this DeFi summer 2023? That is the question that a lot of people are asking. Well, firstly, let's look on chain. The price of AAVE rocketed off the back of some pretty aggressive whale accumulation. So we see Whale Wallet 0x5 A80 accumulated $13 million of AAVE in the past few hours. When this tweet was posted, it was roughly 12 hours ago. So 17 hours ago from the time of recording this video was your major buys starting to happen on AAVE. Then you also saw another whale significantly trade out of ETH into Uniswap. So they withdrew $4 million worth of ETH. They spent $500 on Uni, so $1 million on Uni, 1.65 on Ethereum, and then 24,000 AAVE purchased at 68. They made a lot of money here. So these whales were aggressively positioning themselves and still are. I mean, $72 is not actually, it's higher than the price of AAVE right now. Some of these whales are buying up AAVE and Uni at force within this DeFi narrative. And that has been one of the drivers, some of the on-chain activity. And you can see this on the on-chain data behind some of the big price pumps from, SNX, Uni, AAVE, Curve, etc. Curve probably been lagging some of the other big ones. I'd say AAVE, Compound have been, your two strongest performers. But let's answer the question then, because with on-chain starting to look nice, is this DeFi Summer 2023? Well, firstly, a bit of history. If you guys don't remember, DeFi Summer 2020 was crazy. This was my first, as an investor, major period where I started learning a lot about DeFi and started really getting much deeper into the DeFi space. So 2019, you guys will remember, this was the time when I was, just buying some Bitcoin, ETH, pretty hands off on chain. There was not much to do in the market. So if you wanted to do something with your Ethereum, you couldn't really do much with it. So then fast forward into 2020, suddenly with all these DeFi projects launching, you could take your Ethereum and you could stake it. You could take your Ethereum and you could put it up as collateral to borrow money against it and stake it in a liquidity pool. And this was really the setup, the foundation for 2021, which was obviously, that was your crazy Ponzi DeFi year where you saw those 1,000% yields and, free money and just money printing. And it was just absolutely insane from a DeFi perspective, 2021, especially that phantom run towards the end of the year with DeFi, they're exploding $10 billion in TVL coming in, the AVAX rush incentives in, August through to November. That period was insane. But 2020 was actually your foundational year for DeFi. And during that period, the strong performers were your compounds, your AAVEs, your Uniswaps, these DeFi 1.0 pillars, which were your first iterations of DeFi products, which got your first users, myself included, during that period. And that's really what got me interested in DeFi. So fast forward 3 years, off the back of what was founded in 2020, we're starting to now see a lot of kind of a big shift in DeFi. We're seeing a lot of these projects evolve from their 1.0s to like their 3.0s and their 4.0s. So products like AAVE are now launching stablecoins. Synthetics is now launching its version 3. These aren't 1.0 pieces of software and tech anymore. They might be considered DeFi 1.0, but actually, if you look under the hood, a lot of them use that initial runway that they developed from 2020 to 2021 to actually build under the hood and ship new products, which are now only starting to launch in 2023. And of course, the bear market has given more of a time and an emphasis on building these products. So the first distinction I want to make is, since 2020, I don't think we're on DeFi 1.0 anymore. We're just calling them DeFi 1.0 as kind of your, just to categorize them all. But because of that shift over time, you've seen structurally, fundamentally, a lot of these products are actually very different from what they were in 2020. So I would not call these like pure OG coin pumps, but I would call them pumps from the DeFi coins that people trust and the DeFi coins that people believe in and know have been building over that time period. And when you see OG coins pumping, when you see tokens that people trust in a specific niche pumping, that's usually an indicator to look further into that niche. And that's why I said here on the tweet, this is a narrative I'm actively monitoring. Because when you see something like this happen, pumps across coins that people trust, and we could And we know that because their communities have been building for years, and the teams are fully vetted, and not all of these, but the majority of them. That really says something about the market. The first thing it says is how the market is structurally looking healthy. That's what 𝗙𝗍 made the point of in his tweet here. But the next thing that's important to note is, could that spell a greater DeFi rotation? Because when you get liquidity going into your top performers, so let's look on the list here, your Compound, your AAVE, your UNI, your Synthetics, your big market cap projects, that are your multi-billion-dollar market caps, typically what we see is money filters into the large caps, and then you will see some sort of trickle-down effect into the smaller caps, which haven't run as much. So that is really where I'm interested right now, looking at this DeFi run. I'm kind of sitting back and I'm going, okay, DeFi is running. The first thing we need to affirm whether this is simply a local top forming or whether this is a confirmed trend, all right? So we need to see over the next few days. I'm sorry for everyone that wants to ape into stuff right now, but we actually do need to see over the next, I would say 1 to 2 days, conservatively, how price actually responds at these levels. Is this a sustained trend? You can actually see here on the DeFi index, we're starting to make some momentum. Do we flip the 520 level and turn this into support? That would be really key. Or is this simply just kind of your exit liquidity pump off the bottom of the DeFi index here? This is an index, by the way, everyone forgets about that you need to be using. If you are interested in DeFi, put this in your coin gecko or your trading view, because this is your total index of the DeFi market. It's actually an index on Binance. Super interesting. It's kind of, got most of the biggest coins in there, which gives you an idea about how the overall market capitalization is trending, and you can actually chart it, which is really, really cool. So we can see your really big DeFi move would only really happen at the break of this orange level here, in confluence with what is probably going to be a break of your support line. So this is your bullish scenario. We break, we hold, we retest in this zone, and then we push up. We test this zone again. Look, price never acts perfectly. You might see something like this, but then eventually this will hold, and that could be your kind of launch pad for the next leg up here on the DeFi index. But we need to see how we react in this zone. We could end up getting rejected as well, and then this theory goes out the window. So that's why I said we need to wait a few days to see whether there's a sustained bid here on these alts. So AAVE, Uniswap, Compound, do they show signs of a blow-off top and start reversing? Or do they actually consolidate and they start to attempt another high again? If they do consolidate, that's a sign to me that there could be a bigger rotation here. So if there is a bigger rotation, so let's just assume that there is continuation on these large DeFi caps and there's not just a blow-off top, all right? If there is consolidation, that would signal to me that there's a bigger DeFi narrative brewing. And it's off the back of what I talked about, development, and it's also off the back of funding. So we're seeing the DeFi sector actually had the biggest concentrated funding for the last week. $50 million raised into some new DeFi products. So that's also interesting. There is something brewing here. If you get consolidation, that potentially a bigger DeFi narrative could be beginning. If it is, then I'm eyeing some of the smaller DeFi protocols. I'm not going to ape into AAVE. I'm not going to ape into Compound. I'm personally not going to ape into Uniswap. What I'll be looking for is a rotation into some of the other DeFi plays which haven't run as much, but are still showing relative strength versus their Bitcoin pairs. Working these out is very simple. Pick projects you like, pick projects you believe in fundamentally that haven't run as much. You could look down the list, something like a Frax only up 9.8% this week. A GMX, technically it's not old DeFi, but it is new DeFi. It's a perpdex product. These kind of coins here, Balancer, Yearn, I'm just picking them off the top of my head. But I'm just starting to look at some of the ones that haven't run, but are underneath the general DeFi narrative, and also some of the smaller caps as well. And I mean, I'm just going through the list here, seeing if I can pick any more off the top of my head that I like, but there's probably tons I'm going to miss in this video. But let's go on to number 2. Page number 2 on CoinGecko, see if there's anything else. Beefy 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃. 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃 hasn't really run. That's your options trading platform. We kind of see these real yield products, especially the Arbitrum products. You guys know they were super hot last year. They've cooled recently. That could be somewhere that capital flows. Your Arbitrum products, think your 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃s, your gains networks. I actually prefer our 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃s to 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃s, to be honest, because it's value accrual. QuickSwap launched a new iteration of their DEX recently. But yeah, I'm just giving you an example. So if we see consolidation on the DeFi Dino, the DeFi 1.0 coins, the next rotation I'm looking for is into these smaller DeFi coins, because that's typically how we see the flow of funds operate. So obviously the major prerequisite is if we get consolidation here on the DeFi index, on these major coins, if we do get consolidation and they start to present a stronger trend forming, then I think the rotation into the small caps will begin to happen. In that case, start looking at those lower caps and start researching those DeFi caps, some of which we've talked about. The other interesting thing to note from an on-chain DeFi perspective is how resilient TVL has been recently. So we saw a period where TVL cooled significantly. I think it was in May this year. We saw a huge dip, but it's basically been just trending sideways for a while. So we haven't had price consolidation, but we have had TVL consolidation. And over the past week, we've seen increases in the capital flowing into Lido through ETH staking, MakerDAO, AAVE. So more people actually using their crypto as collateral to borrow more. Is that a signal of risk appetite coming back in? Because typically when you see inflows into borrowing lending money markets, that's a sign people want to use their tokens as collateral to earn money or generate liquidity off those tokens. Rocket Pool off liquid staking, all showing nice gains for the week. So obviously that's synonymous of a slightly larger crypto risk appetite and the general Bitcoin bounce, but interesting trend to keep note of as well. So that's kind of my plan with the DeFi narrative, looking at how they consolidate and then starting to look at the lower caps. Now, there is the counter thesis here that Fabian outlines that people are overthinking this DeFi pump way too much. And this is also true in the sense that anyone telling you right now that DeFi is going to pump and AAVE is just beginning and we're going to see a huge DeFi summer, I mean, that's just rubbish. This isn't a DeFi summer yet. That's why in my tweet I said DeFi summer ? It's the question, okay, if it can prove itself, can it become a bigger DeFi summer? Well, let's see. If so, we're early to this and we're going to have our finger on the pulse. And we're going to be monitoring this narrative very closely. If it is, then that could present huge trade opportunities. But if not, let's not assume that this pump is the beginning of this next huge DeFi alt season. It's very exciting. And I'm excited because, I forgot to mention the second point. My train of thought completely got lost. I'm excited because, okay, if things consolidate and then I pick my tokens, the third thing to do is work out whether a coin has relative strength. So before you trade a coin, right? Okay, so let's say AAVE uni consolidate. DeFi index flips the horizontal. So there's a couple indicators that, we've got momentum here for DeFi. Things, we start to see an inflow into small caps. I want to get into small caps. The next thing I would do is I would look into the relative strength pairs. So I would go into, let's say, Frax BTC, and I would look at if these tokens are starting to break trend on their BTC pair. Or secondarily, if they're on support on their BTC pair. Because the goal of an investor is to beat the market versus Bitcoin. Bitcoin is like your index. You want to always outperform Bitcoin at all times. So on Frax, I see this support at the 1.5 level. We're kind of in no man's land. So I would look for a reclamation of 2.2. Let's just go through some random coins here and kind of give you an example. On Joe, we have seen a pivot off the lows. We've actually seen our higher lows starting to develop. Get a pullback into this range, and that could be a decent play as long as the USD pairs look good on DeFi. I'm using IMX as an example. I know it's not really a DeFi coin, but you are seeing this also at support if you want to draw it in. So I'm much more interested in looking at the coins that are at major support in the DeFi sector or breaking structure to the upside. So, for example, making a new higher low in the DeFi sector than I am getting into coins that just haven't moved at all or just look terrible from a fundamental perspective. So whenever I trade altcoins in this DeFi narrative, yes, the first thing I'm looking for is whether this is a real thing or whether this is just hot air. And then second thing I'm looking at is coins with either relative strength or at major support levels on their BTC pairs. So always chart on BTC pairs before trading alts. That was the point, the secondary point that I forgot to make. So that's what I mentioned here. Make sure you look for relative strength on these pairs. That is a short-term narrative, right? There is a longer-term narrative, which I'm going to talk about much more in the future. That will be more of a spot buying situation for me, and that's EIP. I mean, I've talked about this last week, but EIP, Cancun upgrade, which is set to reduce L2 fees by a significant amount. This is, I think, probably your biggest Ethereum catalyst versus Bitcoin and ETH ecosystem catalyst versus other L1s for Q3, Q4. So ideally, my plan is, and we'll see if we get this, and I've shown you guys the ETH BTC chart on other shows, so I won't show it to you today, but my plan is we do get that larger pullback at some point during Q3. Maybe we rally ahead of then, and then we get a pullback, liquidity starts to tighten globally, we have a chance to get into some of these L2 plays that are looking quite strong and then ride that into Q4 because EIP, it's being touted for December. It could be pushed back until January. So if you can get buys during Q3 and position yourself more longer term for Q4, this is probably the biggest trade of the year, in my opinion. So yes, this DeFi summer thing looks great for maybe the next few weeks. If we do see a rotation starting to happen, I'll play the rotation. But in terms of like a bigger DeFi play with more bigger spot buys, I'm saving capital, or at least trying to stack capital in which every other altcoin trade becomes a proxy for preparing for, I think, what's a much bigger narrative in Q4, which is the Cancun upgrade for L2 specifically. So I just want to make that very clear. In terms of L2s, I think one of the biggest ones that's talked about a lot is MATIC, also one of the ones that is being force sold on Robinhood. So there has been a lot of sell pressure, but MATIC starting to show signs of a reversal here. So I wanted to bring this to your attention that we have seen MATIC pivoting off its support at 59. We did have quite a large, substantial sell wick 2 weeks ago when you had a lot of that SEC news starting to come out. That resulted in a huge sell-off. I actually bought down here. I did tweet that I was buying some MATIC. I won't hunt for the tweet now, but I did tweet that. The ones that follow me would remember that. That trade is good. I'm in the profit on that. I'm actually holding it because I think there could be more of an upwards thrust from MATIC into this resistance. At resistance at 76, or maybe it's lower if it takes more time to develop on this orange diagonal trend. That's going to be your next major level. If MATIC can flip that level, then you can start looking at your upward scenario for MATIC, which is the targeting of 90 to $1 again. But once again, it could just be a pump into resistance where you see the two EMA hitting confluence with your diagonal here. But nonetheless, if you are a breakout trader and you like trading like this, well, MATIC is one to pay attention to because this is starting to show signs of a reversal. If this is a sustained reversal, then you could get a break of this diagonal trend. So this is one I'm just watching and monitoring. Now, if you do, before we get into the alpha of the week, so the coins that I'm watching, the narratives that I'm watching for this week and some of the specific coins as well, on top of these DeFi coins. Before we get into that, if you do want to trade on an exchange with a lot of these alts, then you can do so on OKX if you're in the right jurisdiction and claim up to a $30,000 bonus in rewards. So if you deposit money into your account, you get a $10,000 mystery box. But even if you don't, even if you just sign up for an account, you can get a $10,000 mystery box as well, just for signing up. So there's 3 steps. First step is just signing up. You get up to $10,000. Step 2 is depositing more than $50. You get another $10,000. Step 3 is trading. If you actively trade, you get another $10,000. So a massive $30,000 total reward bonus for anyone that uses the OKX link in the description to sign up for a new account. Just keep in mind that the mystery box, it's not a guaranteed 10,000, obviously. Otherwise, that'd be the easiest $30,000 ever. You could win absolutely nothing. You could get a mystery box with $1 in it or $0 in it. That's kind of the fun. Or, that's the game. Some people are going to win big mystery boxes. Some people aren't. But good luck to everyone that is opening them. Hopefully some of you guys that have already opened yours have gotten some decent prizes, but don't expect anything. Just treat it as a bit of fun and the potential to win up to 30K. So link in the description for that if you're interested in those rewards. And let's go into some of the coins I'm watching for this week. Just looking through some of the comments now quickly before we get into it. Cardano DeFi. Not super interested in Cardano, to be honest. We can just look at the TVL. And this is the easiest way to see if it's gaining steam. It actually was last month. But let's see what happened over the last couple of weeks. So we had an 18% increase over the last week. That's pretty significant. Majority of liquidity going into their major DEX, which is MinSwap and Indigo. What's Indigo? I don't actually know what Indigo is. Non-cost synthetic assets protocol. Okay, so what is it? Kind of like synthetics or mirror. Liquid staking, JED stablecoin. Yeah, I think the majority is going into this. It's the biggest AMM. It's MinSwap. So, if you are interested in Cardano, you can. I'm just personally not that interested in it. This isn't that exciting for me. And still, Cardano being a top 10 coin only has, where is it ranked? It's ranked 18 for DeFi, despite being, the third biggest L1 by TVL. Still has Polygon, Optimism, Arbitrum, Avalanche. It's not really a DeFi ecosystem that interests me. personally. 𝗕𝗃𝗧 said 2/3 of the tokens will be community owned. If that is true, I need to verify this, but if that is true, that bodes well for the potential airdrop. Of course, I did my airdrop guide last November, so hopefully you guys have been interacting with 𝗕𝗃𝗧 because I think that could be a decent airdrop. If you haven't, I prefer Layer 0 now. So if you are an airdrop hunter, I would focus on Layer 0 more than this. But for the ones that started in November, that is good news if true. So we just got a weekly close, did we? Yeah, we just did. Okay, there you go. So weekly close. I said at the start of the show I'd wait a couple hours, but I got my time zones mixed up. We actually just got the close. We did hold above at 34, so basically no change here. That is a good sign. So let's see over the next few hours how the week starts, but that is a good sign that we did get our weekly close above support. And that is a very bullish weekly close. I mean, not often. I mean, the last weekly close we got, we pumped in, then we closed below, and then we had a huge red candle the next week. Here you're getting a huge weekly pump, the weekly close, and what is like a pretty bullish consolidation pattern, at least in the last few days of the week. So let's see how the week actually begins. But could this be your next candle into this level? Let's see. Pretty cool. What about loopring DeFi? Yeah, loopring's cool. It is kind of off the back of this ZK narrative too. So that would be under my general purview for this L2 trade. I talked about the L2 trade into the EIP Cancun upgrade. That would be one of them. Too much talk, you got me lost. Hopefully not. I mean, I think I was pretty clear on my DeFi plan about how capital rotations typically work. I told you about how you want to trade that in confluence with strong ETH BTC reversals. And I also gave you a list of coins. And I also gave you a narrative for Q4, which is this. And we also talked about the key Bitcoin levels. So I think it's all pretty clear. Maybe it took us 40 minutes, but I think nothing should be too confusing. If you are confused, let me know. Someone said not enough talk. Talk more. How many hours to weekly close? It just closed. All right, now let's go into... Okay, so we talked about our MATIC trade. Let's go into next week. So the Irishman, who is one of the head researchers at Banter, he has outlined a DeFi watch list here, which is basically just some of the major coins we've discussed, SNX, Uni, Comp, AAVE. These are interesting ones to trade, but once again, I'm more interested in the ones that haven't run as much, but are still looking strong on their BTC pairs. So the smaller cap ones. Because I don't think DeFi 1, if it is a new trend, just runs in isolation. I think if this is a DeFi summer, which it may not be, but if it is, and we get confirmation about that over the next few days, then I think it will be the smaller caps that give you those better gains at this stage from a risk-reward perspective. But these are the ones you want to watch now, of course, because even in order to verify the smaller caps, you need these to continue to consolidate. So these are probably the ones you still want to have on your watch list. You also have the exchange tokens, the EDX narrative, the securities narrative. So that's BCH, LTC. LTC, I gave you guys a bit of a setup on before. That's what I'm watching. BCH, I think that's just run so much. I can't even entertain that. Waves. I've heard some scammy stuff from Waves recently, so I kind of avoid it. 𝗵𝗵𝗃. Let's actually look at 𝗵𝗃 because I talked about 𝗵𝗃 on the stream last week. And since then, we've had consolidation as well. So this is another coin that's also consolidating quite nicely. So structurally, from a TA perspective, a lot of coins look good. 𝗵𝗃 also looks good. This looks like a bull flag. I'm sorry, it does. Let's go on the 4-hourly because that's a stupid trend to draw. Well, not even. On the 4-hourly, you kind of have your flag also starting to form. Like this. 𝗵𝗃 loves these setups. So this is another one that's starting to look nice. Consolidating above horizontal support. You have your wedge. If Bitcoin does end up starting the week strongly, I think 𝗵𝗃 as kind of like a higher beta play could outperform. That's what we've seen over the last few weeks. So yeah, not fading 𝗵𝗃, not shorting. I actually remember last week after the stream when we're heading into resistance, I was so tempted to short. And I actually drew this breakout pattern, this blue line here on the 1-hourly, which broke to the upside. So every time we see these wedges from 𝗵𝗃, I don't typically fade them unless they break down. So you see this pattern was actually the catalyst for a pretty big short. And that short took you all the way back down to the 0.10 level, which was a what was it, a breakdown of 60%. Huge gains. If you're using 10x leverage, you've just 7x your money. So I'm not saying always 10x leverage. I definitely wouldn't, just to kind of, contextualize it for the traders. But yeah, see how Pepe responds to this pattern. This is on the 4 hourly. So in the next 8 hours, we will have a move here from Pepe. So that they are all the coins on my watch list. In terms of individual catalysts, I said the reason for DeFi 1.0 was not just OG coins pumping, it was also development, and I think that's further exemplified by the governance proposals we have next week. So we have AAVE DAO with its vote this week. We have Lido Finance implementing a reward sharing program. There's proposals on Curve to add a couple markets. There's a lot of changes happening. Compound V3 deploying on Base, which is the new Coinbase Optimism chain. We're also seeing Osmo cutting inflation by 50%. GMX V2 launching soon. That's actually why if we see a DeFi rotation, GMX is on my list as one of them, alongside some of the Arbitrum coins. But yeah, GMX being an Arbitrum coin is going to be one that I look at. So they're introducing synthetic assets, isolated pools, integrating Chainlink's low latency oracles. That's what I'm keeping an eye on, because GMX is super interesting. Like, in terms of how it performs during periods of market downturns, it's probably one of the only tokens like I'm comfortable holding, because it relies on volatility more than it relies on direction. Now, of course, your upwards direction is typically better. People tend to like longing more than they like shorting. So that's typically why you see price performing better in periods of upwards momentum. But even during periods of downwards momentum, GMX typically holds up better than other coins. Now, if you look at the 200 EMA, you have the 57 level as a pretty major resistance level. If you can reclaim that on GMX, well, that's a pretty strong indicator you can get that next leg up. It has already swung off its lows at 41. Pretty strong 35% move to the upside already. But on the 4 hourly, we actually did see a break of its 200 MA. So this is what I'm looking at. Let's see. I prefer the 1 hourly on the MAs. Let's see. I like 1 hourly and daily. Yeah, 1 hourly. When Bitcoin pumped, it outperformed, consolidated, tested twice. Yeah, this structurally is looking really good. GMX, really, really good. So this DeFi trade, within the context of this DeFi trade, this is one that I'm watching as well. GMX for sure. All right, isn't today the day that MATIC is selling, that Robinhood's selling its MATIC? It is. It is. But could that just be buy the rumor, sell the news? I mean, most people that already have sold have probably already sold. The market knows that there's a major sell event happening today. So could end up actually being a local, that was probably the local bottom for MATIC, the pre-sell-off panic. Pepe and GMX, they're both interesting. They both look good for TA-wise. I can't fault them TA-wise. LTC pumping, yeah, it is. I just would prefer, if I do get an entry, for it actually to be on this trend line. Otherwise, I'm just exposing myself to too much risk. Injective. Okay, let's look at Injective. Injective is one in the Cosmos ecosystem. Let's look on the daily chart for Injective. So on the daily chart, it's actually quite nice. I would prefer to buy at the 6.5 level. But once again, guys, I think the market goes lower than it is today in Q3. So anything you're buying here is more of a shorter term trade. Let's say 2-3 months tops, but probably we're talking weeks, not months. So just keep that in mind. Also for INJ, you have this trend here that you want to keep an eye on. So it is technically forming lower highs. You want to wait for a major reversal, ideally, or a test of support. We did actually get 2 tests of this level. So that would probably be your bigger accumulation zone. Maybe like you want to ladder in a tiny position here. But even so, I don't think this is spot accumulation. So there's like a major capitulation event, that is. This is just all my opinion, not financial advice. This is just, my personal take on the market. VRA. I actually saw a tweet from VRA. Who was it from? 𝗕𝗏𝗧. 𝗕𝗏𝗧. Let's look at his tweet. I thought it was really good. He said, or she, because we don't know who it is. They're not doxed, right? Where is their VRA take? And just keep in mind that you know, they probably own a fuck ton of VRA. But they said, when I shared Trias, the chart looked exactly like the one below. VRA will be one of the biggest next bull run. Added this KuCoin gem to my long-term bags. And just look at the chart, like it's a dead chart. These charts, typically when you hit consolidation phases, can be good accumulation points. But let's just look at whether this is actually in a consolidation phase or whether this is just a... Yeah, so for me, long term, if I'm holding for like years, or if you're holding for years, yeah, you could buy here, sure. But I do like this level more. So you had the initial breakdown during the lunar collapse. We still haven't broken above that level yet. Technically, we're just breaking above now. So if we hold above, that could be a decent place to add. But what I would prefer to see is a pump, a retest. Maybe I'll add some here with my bigger target lower. But yeah, if you are bullish on VRA, and I'm not all over the fundamentals here, Hustle knows a lot more than me. If you are bullish on VRA, then spot-wise, there is a decent accumulation opportunity there. But yeah, I'm not adding it personally, just because I'm very selective with what I hold at the moment. Very selective, and I just can't find room for it in my portfolio. But if you have room, then it's your prerogative if you want to add it. Someone asked me about AVAX. AVAX actually looking quite similar to VRA, but performing much worse. Probably because L1s just aren't favored in this market right now. It's just not really the trade. But you do have your double bottom starting to form. So if we want to draw in the trend here, you do have your double bottom. Let me just make this smaller. You also have your diagonal trend on the weekly. Let's go into the daily as well. Yeah, so we see how we had a breakdown here. So technically it is still lower highs. There's no strength here because if we look at AVAX BTC, it looks horrible. Look at that. This is not a token you long. Always when you're longing tokens, long the coins that are showing relative strength versus Bitcoin. I can't stress enough how important strength and momentum is in crypto. Otherwise, you will just end up... I mean, if you had bought AVAX during the dip, you would be like 30% less better off than if you just bought Bitcoin or some of the tokens that actually had performed well. So that's why a coin like AVAX, you probably wouldn't want to catch a falling knife on because there's just no relative strength here. At least not yet. Joe's performing well. Yeah. So that's basically it for me today. We've talked about quite a lot. Tomorrow I will talk about I'm actually going on Spaces. So we're going to answer questions live on Spaces. I want to give a quick shout out to one of our primary show partners, which is CoinWeb. They are launching a new wallet very, very soon, which is cool because it's powered by L2, but it allows you to create tokens, send and receive them with others. So it's very interesting. It's not like a MetaMask where, you just store tokens. You can actually create reward tokens and send them to like family members, employees, friends, etc. on the app. And it's multi-chain as well. So you can transfer between multiple chains. So very, very cool, unique take on self-custody. Yeah, it's a cool wallet that I'm currently waiting for in the beta. But if you want to wait as well for when it comes out, there's actually a chance to grab a $1,000 reward here just by following the quests, which are in the link in the description. So to win that reward, all you need to do is follow them, join the Telegram, and join their quest board. And that wallet will be launching soon. So it's a pretty cool one, multi-chain L2 wallet for you guys if you are interested in joining the beta. Someone mentioned perp. I prefer some of the other perp dexes to perp, but it's still good. All right, I'm going to see you guys in the next video, which will be on Wednesday, Spaces tomorrow. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a lovely day. Peace out.